the opinions, and we all got them because opinions are like cell phone these days. Everybody got one, right? We don't want to talk about the hypothetical what ifs. We want to share some practical stuff because I am the one here with the least amount of experience. James and Joe are actually boots on the ground who are doing cool things, and then they tell me that, and I tell them that they're conspiracy theorists. So with no further ado, let me start the screen share so it's not just tell, it's also show. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Usually everybody talks to you about the good things, and you usually leave with someone's advice of you should create more agents. And the minute you want to ask the follow-up question, how do I do that? The suggester is already gone to spread the same message to someone else. And like there's the FOMO that sets in because they're telling you about all these wonderful things, but you have no clue what to do next, right? So let me introduce today's panel. James Tybert. James is the Salesforce Solution Manager at Paid, and Joe from CaliberMind, who is Director of, actually, Joe, I did not write your title. Director of Data Strategy. That's the proper title for Joe. Do you guys want to take a minute, introduce yourselves, kind of give people an overview of what it is that you do? James, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Nadia. I'm really happy to be here. Excited to talk to you guys today. I am the Salesforce Solutions Manager at Payit. Payit is a company that builds digital platforms for government agencies to help them collect revenue, operate more efficiently, and most importantly, deliver a better customer experience for all kinds of various transactions that citizens might interact with government on. So really excited to be here and be on the panel.
Joe, over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Joe. Notice how Nadia did not say my last name. We'll just keep it at Joe. That's good.
Joe Schatzschneider. I'm good at that. I practiced.
I am the Director of Marketing Data Strategy at CaliberMind. I love working with data, and I have the pleasure of working with our clients to really get their data in order for accurate reporting. A big part of working with data, especially over the past couple of years, is working with AI. So I've had a lot of opportunity there as well. I'm really excited to talk about that today.
And let's dive right in. And I figured, so we have it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Might as well kind of address the bad and the ugly, get the itch scratched, get the elephant out of the room, and then we'll talk about the wonderful things that could be done. So with this, I don't know what your LinkedIn feed looks like. If you're in my network, chances are some of mine spills over onto yours. Like this guy is amazing. Everybody loves, lovable, no pun intended. But I kid you not, every time somebody says about this wonderful thing that they could do, I get this feeling where we're talking about movies. I should have mentioned the Toy Story, the piece of it with the aliens and the claw machine, right? The claw. I swear in some of my marketing Slack channels, that's the reaction, right? And it's always the gotcha, the hack, the one thing that somebody figured out. But it's never scalable. And you never hear the stories where you should be more mindful of the XYZ that happened. Those are usually buried. And unless you are like looking at TechCrunch every morning to kind of see the juicy details of what came out, you might not even see that on your LinkedIn. I wonder if your guys' feeds are like mine. It's just the wonderful, crazy things that you should do and you're behind, or you actually get the reality check. James, how about you?
Totally. Theory is just like, it's totally the perfect storm of what's going on today in the age of AI. It promises to disrupt technology and process, but a lot of the times what it delivers is just chaos, right? It just tempts us to skip a lot of the fundamentals that a lot of developers or marketers should follow. And you just have to understand that AI is really just a powerful amplifier. It's like a megaphone, right? So you give it to a brilliant strategist like a Nadia or a Joe, and it amplifies the genius.
Oh, we're still friends.
On the counter side of that too, though, is like you give it to somebody who's sloppy and it just amplifies the sloppiness across the entire organization.
Joe, what's your take? Well, you were called the brilliant strategist, so your take must be in line with what James just said.
Yeah, my favorite guy on LinkedIn, I cannot think of his name, but he's one of the louder influencers, is the guy who every time someone says, oh, I replaced my SDR organization with AI and we made $100 million. And the guy comments, why are you posting this for free if it's going to make you $100 million? And he is always there, always commenting that. And it's so true, because it's so easy to say, we did this incredible thing with AI. But come on, is it true? I mean, prove it. I'm not buying it yet.
Yeah.
So, the crazy thing that James, actually you brought up when we were doing prep for this webinar is the T app. And I started looking into it. And I guess somebody brilliant enough decided that this Vibe everything could go beyond not monetizing it. Joe, to your point, everything can be monetized, right? Before you know it, there's the massive leak. I'm sure there are lawsuits, and I'm sure there's all this other stuff that does not make it on the front pages. Does anything else come to your mind?
And, unfortunately, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of it. It's really the cautionary tale of our time. And, the hype cycle is really seductive. You see these $100 million valuations that are built on vibes, and it makes for a great headline. But, without the guardrails of security, data governance, process, that same speed to market can just lead you right off a cliff. It's a direct line really from like the cover of Forbes on our previous slide there to just like a catastrophic data breach that we've seen here with the T app in the
It's
last
not
few years.
rags to riches, it's hero to zero.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think calling the T issue a data breach is really giving them too much credit. They basically posted women's PII data online because they didn't have proper expertise and security protocols in place. I think that's exactly it. It's so easy to do things quickly right now, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily doing them well. And it's really important to have that expertise in place so that you don't end up doing something catastrophic like what T did.
I told you guys that I got the best of the best in this webinar. We're going to bust some myths here. We're not going to tell you about the wonderful things that could be, should be, would be. We're going to actually address the real stuff. So I love it. And here's the vibe everything. So what I'm going to take here, I'm going to take vibe marketing because I kid you not, and maybe I'm the only one offended, which makes me a Grinch, but hopefully not. I saw a listing for a vibe marketer, and the company said, we don't care about your experience, about your education. As long as you found your love language with AI models, that's all we want. We want, I think they said hundreds of pieces of content produced per week. And that was the only prerequisite to have the energy, maybe drink that crazy Costco coffee, Joe, that you were talking about, to keep producing those pieces of content. And to me, it felt like a slap on the face because out of a sudden, experience doesn't matter. It kind of does. I mean, it's only in sports that youth beats experience. You can run faster, you can jump higher, other things that require you to have seen the play out of certain scenarios, right? But to me, it's this notion of expertise doesn't matter anymore is a little bit concerning and disturbing. And I wonder if you want to pick one or the other, Joe, pick the next one and kind of, share your thoughts on it and the considerations that people should have.
Yeah, and I do actually, we had a really good question in chat, just a quick explanation of, we're throwing vibe in front of this stuff and what does that really mean? I think across the board, it's using a large language model, using Chat GPT, Gemini, whatever, to iterate alongside with, to work with the LLM to do things quickly. That doesn't necessarily make it more or less effective, but it definitely makes you faster. Vibe coding, some data analysis, some software data jobs can be built very quickly using a large language model. Not all data jobs, not all code, not all analysis can be done very quickly. But if you can find the right level of effort and work with LLMs in the right way, you can gain a lot of efficiency without, maybe hitting that quality threshold that starts to cause issues.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
James, what are your thoughts on vibe coding? I know you do crazy, interesting stuff in Salesforce with all of it, and we'll cover that, but take that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can just speak to it from my experience. If you have a lot of times with Salesforce, and I'm sure a lot of this audience uses Salesforce internally with their companies, it's extremely helpful. We can use it to set up queries, to build frameworks for automations within Salesforce. So there's really a lot of good that comes with it. I think a lot of the times you have to be extremely careful about any time that you're going to be editing any kind of like production data or things like that. So you have to approach it with a lot of care and thoughtfulness. So as long as you're playing within the guardrails of security and data governance and process, I think there's a lot of good to be had, but you just have to be careful.
You just have to be careful. So I am the researcher here. I'm the one looking. Marketers are researchers. That's what we do. We analyze trends. So I looked at all these different publications that recently released their stats, right? It all started with a McKinsey report, and that made the front lines of everything, where they said on average, you see productivity gains of 30 to 40%. Holy cow. I don't know if that's the stat that Salesforce saw, that Microsoft saw when they started laying people off by a dozen. I mean, that's actually proportionally could be in that direction, hopefully not. But then, recently, which is after the McKinsey report, the other findings started coming out were the one that shocked me was the the Meter open source developer community, where they said on average in their study, they said 20% loss of productivity was noticed because people that do want to exercise the diligence and care, and James, to your point, make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, it takes them a minute to QA things, to rework things, to figure out the complexity of how code is written. And then we have the scandalous MIT report, which I know there's a subreddit about it, I know, where they said 95% of organizations cannot show any meaningful ROI. All the marketers probably from those organizations joined marketing communities and kind of jumped on we did a hack, we produced 10 more pieces of content in half the time or whatever. But they, according to the study, they claim that they have not seen that much output. I would be curious to hear your reaction. And Joe, maybe we could start with you, because I know you talk to a lot of people that ask you these very questions. CaliberMind uses AI functionality internally and within our product. So what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, honestly, my initial reaction is, how many projects do generate ROI? It's the same thing with AI. I mean, it's a very powerful tool, but if it's not implemented correctly, if it doesn't become ingrained as a part of your processes, if people aren't trained on it, it's not going to work. So 95% of orgs probably threw AI out there and tried to just hope it magically fix everything. And that's not the case. It does just like anything else. It takes some guidance and proper deployment to actually see benefits.
And I like your intern analogy that you made on one of these previous webinars, where if you don't give it and those who use it enough training of what the possibilities are, just play with it, the advice is just dive in. I mean, that's what you hear everywhere, right? Like, okay, dive in, head first, feet first, just do a cannonball. How do I dive in? What are the guidelines? And sometimes, people are apprehensive about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to use what I call the intern test. And if it's something you would teach your intern to do, it could be a good exercise for AI. It takes time to train the AI. You need to give it proper guidelines. You need to work on your prompt or your system instructions. But if you do that and you go through that effort, now you have something that can be done repeatedly and consistently and correctly more often than not. And that's how you really start to individually gain efficiency and impact by using AI.
And I'll just point out too here, it's really interesting looking at this slide. You really see the paradox in the numbers where, how can McKinsey report a 30 to 40% productivity gain while an MIT study is finding, 95% of pilots fail to deliver any ROI? I don't think that it's just that one is wrong here. It's that they're measuring two different things. The gains are happening really on those simple, isolated tasks. And then the failures are happening when AI is misapplied to, complex business problems without having that proper data foundation. So take that with a grain of salt. And to Nadia, what you said earlier about the time that it takes to verify the output of these AIs, I call that kind of a verification tax. And it's, your employees have to spend their time double checking every single AI output that they generate. You're paying this verification tax, which is, any promised productivity gains are essentially erased when your employees have to spend this time validating it.
I never thought I would apply this saying to the workspace, that death and taxes are the only things for certain. And even with AI, death and taxes, the verification tax is still here. To your point about the complex tasks versus easier tasks, more repeatable tasks. So I pulled some snapshots, and I will let you guys kind of rest your eyes on the slide. I know there's a lot going on, but if we start from kind of left to right, this is again the findings of meter.org. It shows you the diminishing return of AI that replaces the functionality of a human otherwise doing this role when the time to complete the task increases. So if you look at the dashed line, the one with a bunch of blue crosses on it, if you're looking at a task that takes 16 hours to complete, and you can imagine it's probably multiple communications. Somebody gave me an example in the law office. A paralegal would be managing the flow of documents, connecting to all the parties on a case. Then that output would be next to minimal in value, just because so many decisions have to be made along the way, even though tasks themselves are very complete, but it's a process stitched through many tasks. Now on the right, it shows you all the different models and how good they are completing certain things on like this, 0 to 100 scale. And what really blew my mind, like we have Gemini 2.5 Pro circled here, right? it shows you the easy tasks and the hard tasks, and the kind of think about it as ROI on the something that's done perfectly. It varies.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely makes sense. Language models are very similar to human thought, truly. When things are more complex, it tries to break down that task into smaller subtasks, and then there's more opportunity for error there. I think this is a super interesting view, not only going from easy to hard, but also just looking at the different models and how impactful the gains are when you look at some of the newer models like GPT-5, the new Claude models. I mean, these things are coming out with new models every 6 or so months, and you're seeing massive gains really across the board, but especially when you look even at just the easy tasks. I think it's really interesting to think about where we're going to be a year or two from now if these gains are able to continue.
So there's like a
Yeah.
firestorm brewing on Reddit, and I'm sorry, James, I interrupted you. People who are upset with ChatGPT 5, like they expected something and it wasn't it. And apparently that got to Sam Altman too, because he appears to have been maybe still is a large shareholder in Reddit. So I'm sure he's going to have more gray hair. I know he's paying attention to this notion of still not everybody's pleased with the newest developments, even though there's the measurable gains, according to this report.
Yep. I agree. And my point just here is, at least for the foreseeable future, I think human oversight of these AI tasks is absolutely critical and at the same point, time consuming, but it has to be part of the equation.
And essentially, that's what the rest of the equation is made of, this continuous confusion. Joe, that probably describes the world of all of the revenue operations and marketing operations and sales operations people. The shiny bullet syndrome just persists, right? There's more data, there's more channels. We bring new tools to solve the challenge of data, but it generates more data. We bring AI to find hidden insights, and that thing gets confused because the data underneath is not ready. So this proliferating state of confusion, I'm curious if that can be addressed through technology, or it will be addressed through human trained to change their behavior and expectations.
You'll go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take both. We've had such a just onslaught of data over the past 10 or so years where there's too much data now. I mean, it's way too much. You can't use it. We focused on collecting everything. We forgot about the actual reason for collecting it. And I'm sure, I don't want to put anybody's Salesforce on blast, but I'm sure you can all feel that in your Salesforce instances and your Marketo instances when there's a million different columns. We've got industries from 7 different vendors. It's great to collect that data, but we have to use it. I think there's been a little failure to do that, and that's a failure of process as well as a failure of tooling. And AI can help that, but AI really can't just magically make your data all better. I would say that is not a strong use case for AI data cleanup necessarily. It can help you maybe identify problems. It can help recommend process changes. If you do a voice to text on an LLM and you just talk through how your RevOps process looks, it can help kind of map that out and maybe identify gaps, but it can't fix that. It's not going to update your tooling. So there's still definitely going to have to be people involved to get this sorted out and to get the most value out of AI with that clean input data.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me, Joe, like the promise of AI was simplicity, right? But the reality of it has just been this explosion of complexity in some ways, right? Without these coherent data strategies that I think a lot of companies today are lacking. Each new tool that you buy just creates another data silo. And what does that do? It makes it harder, not easier, to get that clear, unified picture of the entire customer journey. So.
And I think that takes us to the good, where we could actually use some of that to create those very things that you guys are talking about. And it's funny to me, Joe, that you said that we've been focusing on collecting all the data we can. We had that conversation going on for a few years. The grief that people have with that conversation is that you cannot collect everything to the 100th percentile. And the question becomes like, you already have so much. Are you even doing things with what you got? Or are you in a hoarding mode, trying to get as much as you can? Because what's going to change if you're not doing anything with it right now? Well, that changed, but just a side note. So why don't we start with the responsibility around doing everything vibe as the precursor to AI doing the good? And I will start with something that Scott Brinker shared recently, the Lemkin scale of vibe coding, where he said, you go from green to red. Clearly, the example is on the right. That's the PII should never be shared. I remember training we had actually when I was with Payet, where IT told us not to ever put the Salesforce schema into ChatGPT. I mean, it seemed like such a good idea. It's going to make things so much easier, right? But got to be mindful of that. I mean, I'm glad today that's different. But what is your attitude towards all of the things on the slide, and especially vibe dashboarding, because that one kind of operates within the set of data that is yours, that as long as you're responsible, you cleanse that, you match that, it all comes together, you're probably okay to get wonderful things out of it. And I'm sure, Joe, you will show us the demo of that. Maybe we could start with you, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting with Vibe dashboarding. You can build a dashboard without providing any proprietary or PII type data. All you need is a clean data dictionary and properly documented schema. Now, I said all you need. That's really hard to have in practice.
That's a big
It's a
one.
work, but it doesn't need to necessarily look through the actual data to build a good dashboard. It can all be done with proper definitions.
And to me, landing pages is the most alluring here, because I think the bane of every marketer's existence is to create more landing pages and then figure out how to tie them to everything else that you got going on. James, anything here speaks to you?
I've never heard of the Lumpkin scale of vibe coding before.
Educating on this webinar.
I learned something too, but I think it's, a fantastic mental model for just anybody in ops, sales ops, rev ops, marketing ops. I think of it now kind of as like a risk framework. And I think the way to approach it is we should really just be encouraging our teams to experiment and vibe in the green zone here with internal tools and prototypes, but we must have rigorous governance and human expertise in place before we even think about touching those orange or red zones there. That's where the customer data and the core business logics really reside. So you can lose the entire game in a single move if you mess that up. Just being aware and cognizant of that.
Yeah, so let's vibe in a green zone. I love it. That's like a catchphrase now. So let me start with what we already I feel like this topic is not new, but the more tools you have, the more complexities you have. These numbers are again from Scott Brinker, the survey that he did early in the year. 65% of people still are seeing data integrations. I'm surprised it's just 65. The other ones probably didn't know what was going on in their system, so they said, I'm totally fine because somebody else takes care of it. The complex data infrastructures and the scarcity of resources, all the layoffs of big companies contributed to that. The challenges of cross-functional collaboration with certain teams become blockers because they just got a long queue of tickets to process access to data and access to reporting. The continuous needs of in the moment, the minute you produce a report, people want the second version, the third version, because now they can think of more questions. They want to question the data, but then it has to go back to the end of the queue and things don't happen. How much of that do you think is isolated to really big companies versus how much of this is just across the board and applies to all sorts of ops teams, marketing, sales, and revenue? Whoever wants to start.
Or Joe, if you would like to take it first.
I mean, I've built dashboards for a lot of different size companies, and you can spend hours and hours talking about the requirements, figuring out exactly which metrics, how it should be displayed. There will always be a second iteration. I have never released the perfect dashboard on the first try. And so I think that's why something like vibe dashboarding works very well. Anything around the vibe concept, it's great for creating the first thing, but it really shines when you need to iterate or when you need to repeat or when you need to do a slightly different version for somebody else. That's where you really start to make those efficiency gains and you save yourself a lot of time.
Yeah, I think vibe dashboarding is one of the most promising green light use cases. But you look at this chart, and the number one challenge here is data integration. These tools are only as good as the data that you feed to them. And if you haven't solved the problem of pulling clean data from your different systems, a vibe dashboard is just only going to give you a faster, prettier view, but still incorrect answers.
I think about it like that iceberg in the Titanic movie, right? Everybody saw the tip of the iceberg, but what really took the ship down was the bottom that was underwater. And that's like all of your data infrastructure, things that most people will not see. They'll just see the tip of the iceberg, something that they're addressing, and AI could help. The more you go into the rabbit hole using Alice in Wonderland, gets curiosier and curiosier. And I'm sure on this call, everybody could attest to that. James, you have this framework of 4 pillars to AI Ready Foundation. Kind of take us through that.
Yeah, so I put this together with my Salesforce background in mind, but there's really 4 pillars to an AI data ready foundation. How I think about it is to build, defense, and unlock AI's really true potential. We have to focus on these 4 foundational pillars. Think of these as a process of turning a chaotic pile of information into a reliable, intelligent ecosystem. The first pillar is data hygiene and accuracy. It's the foundation. This is the absolute non-negotiable first step with your data. It's foundational blocking and tackling. And AI cannot make sense of your business if your CRM treats United States, USA, and US as 3 different countries. You see down below that I have the 3 foundational hygiene initiatives. And the first one is standardization, right? So enforcing consistent formats for everything from country codes to job titles to the stages in your sales cycle are extremely important. The validation of that data using automated processes to continuously verify, cleanse that contact information, which reduces those email bounce rates and protects your sender reputation if you're a marketer. Deduplication is a huge one I see a lot of the times with Salesforce instances. You really need to implement robust automated processes to merge those duplicate records the moment they appear, rather than just relying on a massive manual cleanup project just like once a quarter. I see that all too frequently. They say that you wouldn't build a skyscraper on a swamp. So that's what companies are doing today when they deploy AI on top of messy data. I always reference a G2 report that found that 53% of sales leaders see poor data quality as the single biggest barrier to AI adoption. And without basic hygiene, your AI models are essentially built on quicksand. So that's the first one. Nadia, Joe, any thoughts?
I wonder if AI hallucination is really hallucination, or it's the output of your bad data. You just don't recognize what came out because you don't know what's in there.
Exactly. I see that so much with like Salesforce stuff. If I'm working with a ChatGPT or Gemini, they'll guess what your standard field names are. And you just can't have that. If you're building code or if you're building something within Salesforce, you cannot just guess. It has to know your data structures. And that takes me to pillar 2 is the rule book, which is essentially data governance and stewardship. So at a company, if your data is your most valuable asset, which it should be, governance is the vault that you would keep it in. So the rules for who gets access to that vault is the key, right? So a strong governance framework provides the clarity that AI needs to learn your business logic. That includes a living data dictionary. It should be a living, breathing resource that defines every critical field, its business purpose, how it's calculated. The second thing you'll see there is clear ownership. I notice a lot of the times a lack of accountability is the primary driver of data decay. Governance means assigning a specific person or team as the steward for every critical data point. So marketing, for example, would own like lead source, sales ops owns territory, customer success would own lifecycle stage, things like that. And then the last piece of that is the compliance framework. So AI processes sensitive data. We all know that. Making compliance basically non-negotiable. Your governance must ensure that the data is stored, secure, and used in strict adherence to all regulations. So like GDPR, CCPA, which require clear user consent for automated decisions. We see that all the time, especially on our outdoor side of our business at Pay It. We have to make sure that we're protecting user data to the highest extent possible. Any comments on that piece?
Yeah, I think it's funny how sometimes you hear people, just because you used AI to break a rule, you still broke that rule. You need to be secure. You need to follow your protocols. Funneling it into an LLM doesn't absolve you of those mistakes.
100%.
It wasn't me. Did anybody tell you about vicarious liability?
Exactly. The last one there, or the third one rather, is data accessibility and integration. The data is the lifeblood of your company. In most organizations, it's trapped in these clogged arteries. We call them data silos. AI needs a holistic view of the customer journey to deliver those insights. The first one that's extremely important is just eliminate those silos, actively integrating your systems, your CRM, your marketing automation, your support tools, your financial systems even. brings all that data together, which then leads you to have a unified data model, a single connected view of the customer from the first ad that they saw potentially to their renewal date after you close the opportunity. And then the third piece I put there is ensuring real-time synchronization of that data. So you must have the data flowing between the systems accurately and as near real time as you possibly can, so that AI-driven actions are based on the most current information available. Then leading on to the fourth pillar is the logical data model and schema, the blueprint, as we refer to it. Once your data is clean, governed, connected, it needs a blueprint. So this is how the AI connects the dots to understand causality, not just what happened, but why it happened. So a well-designed schema turns a pile of facts into a map of relationships that provides actionable intelligence. And the first one you'll see is a relational structure. Salesforce does this well by design. Designing a schema that logically links different data objects. For example, a campaign is linked to leads that it generated, and then when they are linked to the opportunities that they result, you have that clear picture, right? So clear hierarchies with your data, establishing parent-child relationships for accounts is essential for ABM marketing, account-based marketing. It allows AI to engage at both the individual and the company level. Finally, scalability, building a data model that's flexible enough to adapt as your business changes, new products, new territories, new strategies, without requiring a complete overhaul of your data structures. That's not something you want to do later down the road. That's something that you want to make sure is set up from the get-go, because it's only going to make your life easier. Those are the 4 pillars.
So I feel
Yeah,
like
I love
after
it.
this, yeah, Joe, after this, it's almost like the good timing to dive into CaliberMind and do this demo. Like, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know we wanted to do it a little later in the deck, but I want to be mindful of the time because James just teed up this whole kind of controlled environment with perfect data setup that, you know, CaliberMind acts as repository and processor and structure of all of this. So I don't know if you want to do the show and tell piece now, or you want to go a couple more slides and then do it.
Yeah, I can right now. Am I coming through okay?
For right now.
Okay, perfect. We'll take it.
But it's like the perfect storm for the demos, right? You start doing the demo and the thing is spinning,
Le-
spinning, spinning.
James, what I really like about your foundation there, your pillars, is none of that is new, right? This is all stuff that people around data have been saying is important for a long time now, but it is just so much more important in the world of AI. Like AI is going
Yep.
to really make your mistakes compounded, snowball out of
Yep.
control, and it's a good foundation there.
Thanks, Joe.
So on the topic of structured data and everything, I'm switching over here to a dashboard within CaliberMind. And what we're looking at here is just some demo data that would potentially be of interest to a CMO. There's some key metrics on here, but then what I really want to point out is there's filtering, select different date ranges, change attribution models, different group buys as well here. So we can look at it by opportunity type, by channel, whatever. And the point of me showing this is that it's within a BI tool. This isn't just a simple tabular output SQL query. There's inputs here as well. And so when building something to work for Vibe dashboarding, that has to be taken into account. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to call out because it isn't necessarily straightforward, but AI is able to still handle that nuance because it's a consistent, repeatable rule. And so what I'm going to do for this little walkthrough is actually look to introduce a new widget. And this is just going to be something like month over month average op amount, a widget that could be interesting to a CMO. Just let me get on over to the right spot here. All right, and so what we have here is this kind of interactive chat. And what we've done on the back end is we've set essentially like a system instruction. So if you think of your own custom chat GPTs or your Gemini projects or whatever LLM you're using, we've preceded some instructions that tell Ask Cal how to create proper SQL that will work within our BI dashboard. It has to know how to write SQL in the first place. Obviously, you know, Gemini is well trained in that, but then we also have to kind of tailor it to the nuance of our BI tool. So I'm just going to ask, I'm going to say please, because we got me all spooked with those sentient AI conversations that we started the call with. If it's gonna come and get me, I want to make sure I'm on the right side of things.
Smart, Joe. Smart.
Black Mirror will do it to you.
Okay. So what it's done here is it's basically said, yeah, I can do that. I know how to write SQL. We can actually show the SQL. So you can see within here, there's just some unique nuance. And this is because it needs to work within our BI infrastructure. And then preview the SQL as well. We can see it coming across as a data grid throughout history. So that's good. If I change this over to like a line chart, we can, let me see here, take a look at that. And so now immediately I can see, wow, whatever we were doing in February of 2024, that was awesome. Our opportunity amounts really spiked up. In reality, it's demo data. So, maybe that's not the case, but it's exciting to see this output right here and be able to confirm that this is what our CMO was asking for. This is what they wanted to the chart. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this, and then I'll come back over here and we can get it added to the dashboard.
And it's amazing to me. So that allows you to kind of address those expectations and manage up without having to redo the same dashboard 10 times.
Exactly. And so now we have this first iteration. I mean, that took a minute, right? In my experience, this is probably wrong. The CMO actually probably wanted a different metric that was the average op amount only for closed won opportunities that closed on Tuesdays, because that's how it tends to work when you're working with data and reporting. But again, it's the same concept. It's going to be really easy for me to iterate on that and to get a new version out there. And to take this just one step further, I think Vibe dashboarding is very good, but Vibe interpreting dashboards can be pretty helpful as well. And so when you have a lot of different metrics on a dashboard, you can have a similar functionality here to work with AI. Now we trust this data, we trust this report. Now we can trust the outputs. So let's ask AI something like, which month had the best win rate? And it will be able to actually take this data, interpret it, and help us determine what we're trying to figure out. And that's really helpful as well. It's another way you can save some time with dashboard interpretation.
And I feel like with reports too, once you start showing the same report to different people, they all have a different opinion on what the report tells them. It just depends what is the x-axis where, that up and to the right is manifested against. So I know that people have different opinions. So having one version of truth of what things really mean makes a difference.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I truly have saved a lot of time building dashboards with this Vibe dashboarding concept. And like I said, the initial creation of a new dashboard, it speeds it up, but you have to lay a little bit of foundational groundwork in there to teach it how to interact correctly and how your data works, the definitions, all that good stuff. But it's that iteration. You can iterate so quickly with Vibe dashboarding. And like I've said, the iteration is inevitable. So let's embrace it and let's make it a really speedy, iterative process.
And I was so proud of all the years of Tableau training that I got and paid for. And now all of that, the static view, doesn't take me any further than any of this. The kind of what's behind the scenes. You kind of alluded to that, Joe, that there's structures that AI can pull from that makes the output in these dashboards actually align with your Salesforce, whatever other record of truth you have. Maybe it's your Snowflake, whatever that is, right? Because the worst situation that I've ever seen and actually been in one is where you present something and you did all of this reporting. You did not spend the time to connect with the cross-functional teams to, cross-reference your notes. You present a number and the other person, usually it's marketing, says, we drove whatever, $1 million of revenue. And the sales team says, well, that's great, but only half of that is shown in Salesforce. Where's the other half, right? So you want to make sure that all of those things align. And the one point here on this slide that I wanted to mention, like we talked about the foundation, we talked about know where your stuff comes from, like how is it compartmentalized, if it's your dresser drawer configuration, that's a librarian test. Make sure you understand where each input is being pulled from, right? But what is also interesting to me is this notion of what type of marketing data warehouse kind of aggregates all of this and how does it structured? Because CaliberMind sits on BigQuery, right? And Google loves the structure. They do it extremely well. It's like the commercial airliner here on the right, where it will take the entire crew, not just one person who is the driver of the fighter jet and kind of beelines from point A to point B, but the entire organization with it along the journey, where other databases or data warehouses, I should say, they're not as structured. They kind of do similar things, and we don't ask enough questions when we shop for things, when we look into things, right? Like, what's underneath this? What's the functionality that powers this? Is it something that doesn't even have a standard language underneath it? So if I were to deploy my AI, it's going to either get confused, or the BI team would not be able to cross-reference, validate, QA it, because by the time you got it all done, by the time you deployed everything, got everybody trained, and then people start having this, riffraff, the debates during the meetings, because the engine underneath it was not thought about early on. So, Joe, kind of give us more insights on this, the way you think about it, because you're in the weeds there dealing with all of the structure.
Yeah, the reality with large language models, they're trained on the common, the known. They're trained on what is out in the market. And so when you try to work with large language models and these kind of SQL spin-off, SQL dialect type databases, you're working against 30 years of training data to try to get it to do what you want it to do. There's definitely trade-offs to using something like BigQuery versus something like ClickHouse, and I won't deny that. But there's also trade-offs on trying to maneuver a large language model to use one versus the other. Just a structured database like BigQuery, there's literally hundreds of thousands of Stack Overflow threads with questions around how to use BigQuery. So the training data is out there, and I think it's really what the large language models are set up to try to use.
James, any comments from you?
I love the librarian test. It's essentially like if I walked into your company right now and asked you to find a specific book, right? So, say every customer in the software industry with over 500 employees who engaged with your Q3 campaign and is now at risk of churn. Could you pull that book off the shelf in less than 5 minutes, right? If the answer is no, that means your library is a mess, right? The books are unlabeled, unsorted, piled in the corners. In that scenario, hiring a hyper fast, super intelligent AI librarian is not going to solve your problems. It's just going to find the wrong books for you faster than ever before, right? So you have to organize that library first, period, because otherwise you're not going to gain any efficiencies.
And
I'm going to ask you and ask to phone a friend. I said, can I call Joe, please?
I think that's a great example because it really aligns with the intern test, right? You have a new intern that walks in on day one. Are they going to know where to look for the data that they need? And if the answer is no, then AI is not either. It'd be a simple task, but if it's not documented and the process isn't known, if there aren't definitions, it's just not going to work.
And I feel like the last point to bring this home, and people don't think about it unless they spend crazy amounts of time trying to learn Tableau, as I did early on, and I could not wrap my mind around the concept of a joint. Like, what is a joint? Like, how do I bring all of this together, left, right, center? But I feel like here it applies a lot, because if you're in the kind of the BTC space, joining data is not necessarily the thing. That's where that speed to action, the fighter jet kind of analogy of a ClickHouse that processes hundreds and hundreds of things and randomly pulls, data pieces and gives you the answer, might actually apply. But in the B2B, it's never one thing. The buyer journeys are long, accounts have buying groups, multiple people are doing things. And the only way you can extract anything meaningful out of it is when you can aggregate all of these individual interactions and say, there's something going on. There's a cluster of activity, right? So I feel like data joins is another thing. Like, is whatever that's running AI analysis on my data, can it process joins? Can it see joins? Can the tool underneath it deal with joins, right?
Yep.
All right, this is more like a summary of what we talked about, right? The challenges of any ops team, whether it's sales, revenue, marketing, is like the continuous fires you put out, the continuous stream of tickets, the continuous asks, all the things that we talked about. And, out of the AI use cases of all that's possible, I kind of picked some that we touched on, right? Helping with things that have the structure, code included, appear to be those areas where AI offers the most promise, just because it recognizes the structures and the languages, but there are tons of examples out there so it can learn and train. Anything specific you guys want to call out here?
I would just say that for anybody in an ops role, this is probably the most important slide in our entire deck here.
And here I am trying to gloss over it.
I think, our jobs are changing, right? All of us. And we're no longer just the people who build reports. We're data stewards. We're the translators between the business logic and the systems. We're basically the trainers, right? So we are the human firewall that ensures that AI is used responsibly and effectively. And I think all of these use cases are heavily dependent on structuring your data, just to circle back to that.
All right. With this, we actually have a poll. Thank you, Kamala. Knowing what you guys know now, where are you on this journey towards having something structured and workable with AI? It could be that you have not thought about it until now. Now we gave you the framework and you'll go and implement. It could be that you're waiting for AI to solve it for you. Maybe you defined your core metrics and you know how to calculate them. And then we have options for people with data dictionaries for the advanced bunch, right? Maybe you haven't looked at it in a year, like James said. Maybe you're maintaining it, or maybe you actually have something that's running automation and it's automating it on the fly. So let's see if we got any answers. Kimla, how we doing?
Man.
You guys haven't thought about it. This is a great webinar. I'm glad you came to this one. So now you cannot unhear what you just heard.
That's right.
1 in 3, though, have a data dictionary and maintain it. And to me, that's refreshing because documentation, I feel like, is one of those things that always gets left to, when the question comes up. People with core metrics, it's 10% define the core metrics and figured out how to calculate them. Thank you. I would be curious if anybody figured out a way to keep the data dictionary on full-on automation. I feel like that's the world of MOps, sales ops, and RevOps, but maybe that's the future.
Yeah, it's going to be tougher to do too with, the more data you have in your organization, the tougher it is to get it all documented and maintained. So it's kind of an interesting catch-22 there.
But remember, we said we're going to leave everything to AI and we're going to get rid of all the repetitive process jobs. Well, guess what? Documentation is a repetitive process job. Who's going to kick the horse before it starts moving? Anyways, James, this is to your point, the future of our roles, the ops, the analyst roles, right? There was the panic of who, I think it was Sam Altman actually, or maybe it's the Dario guy from Claude who said, or Anthropic, who said that in 5 years the job landscape, or 2 or 3 years, will look very different. Actually, it was Dario. He went and talked to Anderson Cooper on CNN recently, and I think the role may change, but it will never go away because somebody still has to educate the rest of the group or the rest of the business, people that are removed from data, removed from that, analytical acumen and kind of the STEM background, what to do with all of this output, to recognize what's good, what's bad, to give them context and training. I love this analogy, trainers within the business, because I think historically we've never thought about any team being the steward of the trainers for the rest of the business.
Yeah, I think org structures are going to go through in the next few years a very fundamental change. I think there's going to be people in charge of departments' data, and they're going to be the translators of the business requirements like we have here. And they're going to have a team of AIs that are able to do tasks that even today they're not capable of, but they're going to be able to do it in a few years. So how does that impact org structures? I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
Do you guys think it's more larger organizations that are at risk of the change that's too much too soon? Or do you think small companies will try to go the model where it's one person with an army of AI agents? I'm a little skeptical about that, but if it's a data savvy person. Joe, what's your take?
Yeah, I think everybody is at risk of trying to replace people with AI to become more efficient. I think small organizations might be more likely to try it sooner. And there might be a period of time where that does work eventually. I don't think we're there yet, though. And like we've been saying this whole conversation, if your data's not in a good spot, you're never going to get there.
I guess you will not see the Nadia bot running the next webinar. That's good news for me.
Not yet.
All right, so that was the live demo piece that we did early on to make sure that we do not keep it till the last piece. The one thing in Vibe dashboarding that I wanted to touch on is this concept of black box, right? Because in a lot of cases, you get this Staples easy button where the number is thrown at you. And in some companies, that's just enough. However, I feel like in big organizations where the cross-functional collaboration is important, people want to QA, people want to verify, accessing what's underneath is so important. And Joe, that's to your point where you showed if you want to see SQL, if somebody questions the number, you can absolutely do that. But make sure you think about that auditability and data lineage early on. So I guess the gray zone requirement here is something to maybe talk about as we close out this webinar. I know we got just a couple of minutes. Give me your guys' take on this black box or the murky waters of what's presented. Joe, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it's a very real issue, especially in anything RevOps related. RevOps professionals are very jaded. They've been promised every marketing and sales tool under the sun that was going to completely solve all of their problems, and shockingly, none of them have. So when you see an output that's just do more of this, or here's a number, everybody questions it, they doubt it. So I think the ability to really dig in to the underlying data is very important. And that's why I think dashboards are here to stay, because we don't immediately trust the output or a metric. We need to learn, we need to see, we need to prove it. We need that confirmation that it is telling the truth. And then over time, maybe we'll believe just that metric output.
James, you're one of the most skeptical people that I've met. That's why I like you so much. I think it comes with the territory. I'm sure you have a comment.
It does. I don't think, like Joe said, we shouldn't be using AI to get black box answers. We should be using it to enable our teams to use better tools with that trusted data so that they can exercise their own judgment. Most go-to-market problems are ultimately about people and process, and AI is a tool to support them, not necessarily replace them, I would say.
I like that. And I think, Kim, on this note, we will finish up today's presentation, because I think what we arrived at is we still need people. Businesses are still built on people. We would love to, some of us, not me, get rid of everyone and run a bunch of AI agents, but the future is not here today just yet.
If you've ever screamed into the phone, I want to speak to a human.
Operator!
Saw this coming.
Operator!
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Please do take the survey at the end, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your wonderful information. And